And for everybody to feel confident about the Babylonian Empire, I guess you could call it, they had to see him actually cry after this priest smacked him as hard as he could. If it didn't happen, there would be an omen.
Right.
So, so
It was
the
necessary for be a successful reign.
right, and these men would literally practice crying so that whenever they were smacked, they could freaking cry on demand.
But what I was thinking, and this kind of links to that, what Bob was saying, it kind of reminds me of the difference between a shame based and a guilt based culture. Because the shame based culture is more communal. It's more, what would the neighbors think? What would my family think? What would all the people, what would my ancestors think? What would my descendants think? You're worried about how you're affecting those around you. Whereas the guilt based culture is, how could I have done that? And perhaps it comes from, what would God think of that? What would, what would my higher self think of that? What would my soul, this might have damaged my soul. I remember, I think I told everyone the story. I used to work as a telemarketer, and I did pretty good at it until things were getting tough. So they basically told us to lie on the phone, and I wouldn't do it. And I was getting in trouble for it, and I finally quit. And I had to sign out and give up my ID to get into the building. It's a security thing. And I went to the security guards to turn in my ID, and they're like, "You're leaving? We always like talking to you. Why are you going?" And I explained to them what happened. And I said, "Yeah, but why are you quitting?" And I had to think about it for a minute. And I said, "You might laugh at me for saying this, but when I think of it, the only honest answer that comes back is, I really think that this is bad for my soul, and I can't do this anymore." And yeah, so, but that's that whole thing about the that communal thing that Bob was talking about, as opposed to that individual awareness of stuff. And that works in there with the king being slapped. That's a public shaming.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, you're getting him beyond shame and making it more important to him what the God wants, what the priest, as the representative of the God, wanted. So, yeah, that's my rant.
I wanted to say another thing about what you said earlier, Roger, about when they say that people worship the sun. One of the problems that I have with people putting interpretations on ancient religions is that the use of the words have changed so much. Nowadays, when we say the sun, we think of the yellow thing that burns up there in the sky. But the word the sun actually meant, in ancient languages, the word sun meant the thing that gives you the life force, the thing that makes stuff grow, and it was considered to be beyond the sun. And so now we have the remnant of the word, and when people go back and look at ancient documents, they read the sun from our mindset, not from their mindset.
Yeah.
That's another confounding factor with sort of
And yet,
looking at.
I would point out to you, though, that everything you said about the sun is demonstrably physically real. The sun is the source of all life. The sun is what keeps us warm.
Exactly.
The sun is
Yeah.
responsible for all growth. But yeah, they definitely, we think of this ball of plasma 80, 93 million miles away, with all the, fusion going on and all that kind of stuff. And it's just one of all these other things. It reminds me of the Latin word spiritus, spirit, which literally means air. I think for the ancients, they had a very concrete idea of these things. There is that beautiful thing in the sky. I was freezing. It rose up over the horizon. I'm warm now. Thank you. And
Now, with both of you, one thing I've got to say is like the conversation has been amazing because, for one thing, both of you are talking straight up linguistics. Okay, and you don't hear people break it down to the actual language that's taking place. Okay, that's and I want to point that out that both of you are talking linguistics. You know what I mean? And that's very important because a lot of people do not understand what the whole thing with the sun is. Like there these primordial beliefs actually explain that the sun is it represents something. You know what I mean? It's not just a ball of plasma sitting in the sky. You know what I mean? These people believe that the sun meant something, and you hear things like the world tree. Um, that's a very very spiritual thing back in the day. You know what I mean? They did believe in it. You can see it all across religions, stretching from Europe all the way to India. Every one of them has a tree that is linked together in one form or another through the Indo-European language groups. But you tell that to people who are a part of those separate religions, and they throw a fit. You know, right? Well,
like 5 hours worth of tree thought, right? You will come up with so many things that happen in the tree. The sugar goes here and the other stuff goes here, and then this thing goes there, and then a cell does this, and then this thing goes up. Do you know, when I inject the avocados, I take a drill and I drill a hole into the trunk of the avocado, and I screw a syringe into that hole, and then I load the plunger, and I leave it overnight, so that overnight that acid in my syringe is sucked up into the bark of the tree. And then the acid is taken up to the top of the tree from the little place that I injected it in. It's taken up into right to the very top leaves. And as it goes up further and further, the branches get smaller and smaller. So the acid is divided up at every junction. The acid gets divided up and it goes to the leaves. The leaves do whatever leaves do. And then they send the acid back down through another channel, and it goes all the way down to the roots. And then when it gets to the roots, it's pushed out of the tree. And only when it's pushed out of the tree does it do the job that I want it to do, which is killing the fungus on the roots. And that fungus that's on the roots is acting as a protective barrier, which is stopping the osmosis. And so the tree can't suck water in because it's got this fungus. I kill that fungus and I start living. Okay, so I've said that in a few seconds, few minutes, and it's kind of interesting. But if you stop and sit with that for 14 days, while you understand that a tree is like a miracle, it's like a blueprint for what God is.
Yeah, we take too
That's
much
why
for
I
granted.
think the trees. That's why I think the trees are used in spiritual people's descriptions, not because of the tree you see in your garden, but because of the function of the tree.
Mm-hmm. I've actually dug really deep into that. When it comes to the ancients, it's see, this is where I get weird. Even people who believe in the paranormal and stuff don't really like hearing this, okay? Because like, even on a spiritual level, when it comes to the tree, the connection between how the brain works and how a tree functions is very, very similar. You know what I mean? Like, we have fibers that are within our brain. We have the mossy fibers and the climbing fibers. And the odd part about it is like the way trees are represented and the way they function physically coincides with the way our brain functions in physics and everything within our brain. Okay, and that's hard for people to grasp a hold of. You know what I mean? They don't want to understand that, and it's weird that from ancient times all the way to now, I mean that has always been a common theme. Like everybody has always grasped the concept that the tree is something important. You know what I mean?
They're very impressive. They're very impressive. And Bob was talking, I was thinking about that whole scalar invariance, the fractal thing, that which is above is like unto that which is below, and vice versa. When we look at a tree or really any part of our environment long enough to really consider its miracle and it's the way it exists, I think it gives us an inkling into larger things. I used to meditate on trees quite a bit when I was younger, and I always used to say you could learn everything you need to know about the universe from studying a tree. It might not quite be literally true, but I think there is a lot to be found in paying attention to the particular, especially trees.
Hey Otto, guess what?
Wow.
Write this in your diary.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. After I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of hours of discussion, we finally had right to this wonderful point. Opa. I will write this down, today's date and everything. It is. Oh my goodness. The 6th of March, 2026, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Now, I do want to say the reason why I've been real quiet is because whenever it gets into good conversation like this, I tend to like make it go a little crazy. Like Tan is wanting to really get into religious discussion,